Hey, bird watchers, welcome once again to the Shift Left podcast, where we explore the tools, practices, and people transforming content operations. I'm Dan Milczarski, I'm your host, and in this episode, we tackle a provocative idea. Is it time to retire the classic localization project? Global content operations consultant Jim Compton joins us to explore the shift from project based waterfall style translation efforts to connected, always on, product oriented localization. With over 3 decades in the industry and a reputation for sharp thinking and practical innovation, Jim shares how teams can rethink their approach to scale global content faster, smarter, and more sustainably. Jim, I take it when you started in the industry, things weren't quite as automated as they are today.
Uh, yeah, I mean, to track everything manually, get deliverables back by fax, do a lot of typing in of content. Yeah, very, very manually, I would say. That was the early day of the project.
Yeah, so I started in the industry in 2004, and by then everything was pretty much emailing like Excel spreadsheets around with like project costs in it, and it was Prior to that though, I remember talking to my boss at the time. They had like a cork board, and they had like like not post-it notes, like note cards, right? And they put note cards on it, and they'd be like moving
Yeah,
things around.
like a real kind of Kanban,
Yeah,
I
exactly, yeah.
vaguely remember that we had something like that, but we maybe had a whiteboard with some magnets or something like that. But same gist, right? Like, oh, what state is this thing at? Oh, it's here. Now it's moved. I'm going to move it over. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, and I actually I think there's for me, having been there doing this like stuff, I feel like has been for me uh, pretty advantageous, right? Like just like there's this idea that Gen Xers have, who were not born with technology, had to kind of see it emerge, and so they kind of understand why these things exist. I feel like my experience has helped a lot in that regard, because I was there when these things were created. I know they're not precious. They're maybe not even best practice. They were just artifacts of convenience at the time, and I have no problem, and that's been kind of my professional approach, challenging these things that are being positioned as best practices, including this thing that would seem to be a staple, right? The localization project. Can you facilitate your global business requirements having to do with content without a project? I would assert the answer is absolutely yes. You can, and it is time to retire the localization project.
Listen, great segue. Let's get into it. Let's get into our main topic and explain to us what's broken about it. What isn't working, or what could work better? I guess. Do you
Yeah,
think it's broken, or do you think it just needs to be better?
yeah. I mean, interesting, almost like ship of Theseus question, right? Like, if you replace every part, is it still a project? So, yeah, I think for me, part of it is it was created at a time when the landscape around global business and global content was much different. So maybe that's a good place to start. Like, what has changed from the time when the localization project was this effective tool? And I would say, firstly, um, the just the explosion of content as a tool to be able to run business and run business internationally. There's so much more content that's required today than there used to be. Back when I was doing, localization in the 90s or even early aughts, there's maybe just a handful of different types of content that were available. Like, you might have software strings, you might have a website, you might have a documentation. It was fairly limited the amount of content. And there was always this release schedule that was designed so that you could do all your work in, one language, typically English, right? And then you could do a global release later. I think that has totally changed, right? There's no such thing as like these releases anymore. Like things are released constantly, and the amount of content that you have to produce is huge volumes. Also, it might not even only be created by you as the company. Part of the content that drives your business might be created by your customers or by the market, and also just the number of systems that you have to deal with that manage content. I think this idea that you can kind of get everything organized. I mean, projects, I remember in the day, maybe they still do, had this content of like, or concept of like a handoff kit, even, so implying that you can really organize everything just as if you're going to go into the fax room and send off faxes, then do the work and wait for things to come back. I just think the business landscape that makes that untenable. And also, I mean, it's humans that were driving this, right? So if you now have 10 times more content that you have to make work globally, which is probably even, it's probably much more than that, 100 times more content, you're going to hire 100 people to manage that, right? It has to be different. It's not the correct vehicle, I think, for being able to do anything sort of at scale. That consistent with the theme of the podcast, right? It's like it's downstream, right? So I think, and I very much believe in this, like shift left. The localization project is not like it can't live harmoniously with a shift left philosophy.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is it has to be, I'll say maybe it's time to semi-retire the localization project. I don't think it's fully retire. I don't think it can just go off into the sunset and just live its existence. I do think that there are certain work streams that what you're saying will absolutely work for. There's other, I don't know, more transactional one-off stuff where you kind of need, I don't know if it's a project or some kind of receipt or something to kind of like manage those types of work streams. But if you think
Yeah.
about just even conversations you have with customers over the years, it has transitioned into talking not about projects, but about work streams, about this is a this volume of work, or this is what we're expecting from, even in large organizations, and as siloed as they can get sometimes, they all talk about, well, this is my work stream and this is my work stream. It's not project. It really is. Now there's milestones, there's deliverables, there are
Work to be
tasks.
done. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
not necessarily a project, right?
yeah. I mean, I guess I'm being a little intentionally controversial, right? To have people think about that term. I mean, one way you can think about it is like today, there are micro projects, right? There's work to be done that happens anywhere. But what I really am hoping people do is challenge this idea that you can wait to have work done. The other thing that I think, for me, that I have a problem with the project is actually a problem that I have with the concept of localization as being a separate activity from the actual content operations. This is kind of something that's very dear to me. Is I think content, right, really has a mission, right? Content is created because it has a mission and it needs to accomplish things with the business. If you're running a global business, that content has to accomplish those things in a round world, right? It has to accomplish them in different languages, different cultures, different contexts, which, if you think about this revolution that's been this hyper personalization trend, I don't know why I wouldn't think about content as the language of a content as being another just personalization factor, right? It's part of the context of the person that you have to communicate to, is what language that has to be in. So I wouldn't think of it as separate, right, from the actual work of strategically creating content. That's like, I think maybe my main thing is it localization is not a separate activity. It's actually an embedded capability with your global content program, or your content program, if you want to think about it that way.
And I think that's rapidly changing, especially with the last couple of years with the utilization of AI. I mean, when we talk about the localization industry and AI in general, it's not like we've been twiddling our thumbs with AI. I mean, it's been
Oh,
part of our core for
it,
at least a decade, and
forever. I mean, I would argue things like even translation memory are early applications of AI, and this industry has always been machine translation, right? Like
yeah,
these have
yep.
been things that the industry has always been pretty uh, uh, pioneering about adopting, I think.
But now I feel like that future or the present or what is time that you've just laid out uh, is becoming more possible because I think there was this still wasn't a natural opposition. Localization was seen as an after fact. It was
Yeah.
after the fact. We create our English content because or source content, depending on where your market is, and that's the core content. And then we also have to sell in this market, so let's generate. It was always seen as this burden, and then it started to be seen as a value add. It's like, oh, we're actually making money off of localizing our content. That's great. Let's do more of that. And now it's saying, as we're creating this new content in the beginning, could we also create content simultaneously for any markets that we're going into? But what you just laid out is fascinating because I I I don't know if this is going on, but I just had this idea. It's like personalized content, like with the amount of data and so forth, like Facebook and the social media now, they gather on you. You really could personalize translation content with AI on the fly based off of like, oh, this person speaks this way in their LinkedIn posts or whatever. So when I provide a translation, it's going to be more like this. It's actually pulling like live data from all these things to like create a correspondence as opposed to translation. I think
Yeah.
that's pretty
I mean,
fascinating, man.
it's hyper localized even, right? It's like,
Yeah,
it's
right. Exactly.
personalized to the
Yeah.
level of like what I want to hear, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
someone in a market, right? Someone
Yes.
communicating to you to try and convince you to do something, and try to convince me to do something different. Very likely, if you know enough about me, right, and know enough about you, you can create, and language just becomes a characteristic of that, right?
Yeah.
It's not it's this model of like, I wrote an article a while back, that it says I say there's no such thing as a foreign market, right? There's basically, you can't think of foreign markets anymore. You can either think of it as one global market, or you can think of it as, a billion markets, of individual uh, people who you're trying to contact. And I think they're both. I mean, if you think that way, then you realize you can't treat the localization as an afterthought. It has to be part of your overall strategy. And I really like what you said, because I think this fits into, like, I think the thing that makes this possible, which is why I'm really happy to be on Blackbird podcast, right? Is I mean, there have long been these innovations that like make it into certain applications, right? And when these applications were these kind of monolithic things, you maybe were getting the best of one thing, but some other monolith has that thing. Like, with this trend, which I think is super exciting, this like composability revolution, where every piece of tech has to bring, has to be uh, play ball, within a team sport. They have to bring their capabilities to the table in a way that it can be socialized with other capabilities. And that was kind of for a long time, when I was trying to solve kind of integration challenges, a huge challenge. But there has been a real recent, I think, improvement in the tech that makes it possible to create these composite solutions with the best like microservices of every application that's out there. And how cool is that, right? That really enables you to be very agile. Like if the state of the art changes, which it is all the time, like in some little place, you now can benefit from that, right? Because you've put together a composable architecture, right? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a fantastic point too. Is you've been part of larger organizations before as well, and it's 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 easier to move a small boat in the ocean. Like it's easier to kind of pivot and change as things are coming at you. It's easier to do that when you got the Titanic and you're trying to avoid an iceberg, harder to do, right? And so I think that that's what the new technology landscape, what is possible nowadays, is you can build these malleable, highly flexible solutions that if it needs to change tomorrow, you can change it tomorrow. If there's a new piece of technology that's available, you plug that in and you're constantly unplugging, plugging things based off of as time is changing, as opposed to planting your flag in tech that might not suit what you need today, but you're kind of stuck with it. You got some tech debt. You bought this like monolith, as you
right.
put it, and you're kind of like invested in that to make it work. And you maybe put some duct tape on it, or a couple things here and there. But the landscape has definitely changed when it comes to creating that infrastructure that you need to be agile, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, of course, the thing that needs to tie those systems together is like a nervous system, right? Which is where I see these like integration platform as a service technologies really fitting in, right? It's like it's the orchestration, right? That's able
Yeah.
to take all these pieces. And I mean, and that's another part. Like not only is the components modular, but the workflow, those are modular, right? I think collectively those two things, you really can um, get creative and very specific without having to rely upon like custom development, which becomes its own
Hmm.
trap, right? Or definitely
Yeah.
can. That is one of the problems with being a, a big company, is they tend to have lots of like tech debt that makes it very difficult to be agile. So I mean that I think if I also think like big companies, I think if you're a small company or smaller company, um, the fact that you can like just procure all this stuff and assemble it is a kind of a leveler, playing field leveler. But also big companies, right? If they're agile, right, and they have an agile tech stack, they actually have this benefit that their scale becomes a benefit, right, as
Hmm.
opposed to this impediment. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about the seeing how the composability revolution is sort of manifest. I think it's quite cool to see.
Yeah, another great segue. Yeah, like you imagine that we've orchestrated or planned this before. You keep saying things that kind of just segue perfectly into my next set of questions. Listen, you mentioned that you wrote, an article, and you mentioned this waving goodbye to localization as a philosophy. It's not the first time you've said something controversial, by the way. I stumbled across an old article of yours where you wanted to kiss the file goodbye. So you're
Yeah, right.
trying to always get rid of things. And my question to you is like, if we get rid of things, what's the replacement? So if you want to get rid of
Yeah.
a localization project, how do we operationalize doing so?
Yeah. So I mean, I would very much, if I would replace, if it was my own business, replace the localization project with something like global content operations, right? So I would define what my business requirements are. And actually I would be maybe even more, have higher expectations of what I can achieve than what I used to be able to achieve with localization. One of the things that I think is um, has been a kind of a, not a weakness but a limitation, right? Traditional localization projects don't really make use of metadata auspiciously to improve what the product is that localization is doing. And the other thing I've always had a problem with is like when stuff comes back, there's no analysis about like, did it do well? Like, did it perform its business function globally as it's supposed to? So I think there is a concept called content processing at source, which is like, instead of like creating these like handoff packages that you send into a localization project, bring the capabilities and even new capabilities, analysis capabilities, into where the action is, like where the content actually process is happening, and yeah, replace what you're trying to accomplish, sort of external to your content process, and bring it into your native content operations. So, I mean, I think this is pretty cool, right? Because even the ideation of what content you're creating is no longer separated from making that content global. You can actually, like you were saying, generate content that, based on information about what that content has to accomplish, in the content systems that are managing the content themselves. These systems tend to have cool capabilities for measuring success that just gets lost if you just use these traditional, file-based processes where you're sending stuff off and it comes back and it's yeah. So that's what I would replace the project with, in CMS, global content operations. That, I mean, what does that look like? Practically speaking, I mean, this is orchestration, right? You have defined processes that need to happen. But you're also making use of the fact that this system maybe does this well, but this other system does this better, and so you're not dependent upon the limits of one system. You're maybe having this system do an analysis, this system generate content, this system evaluate how that content, or predicts how that content is going to perform in a market. That becomes possible when you have a very flexible, high composability tech stack.
I think, again, once again with the segues, we're segueing into me sharing my screen, and we'll walk through Blackbird to see like what we could do to kind of simulate what you're talking about. But before we do that, a couple of points here is one, absolutely, you need the process interaction. You need to understand that if you're saying that just because you're philosophically getting rid of the project, it's not that you're getting rid of process. In fact, process needs to
Right.
be even stronger for you to be
Exactly.
able to achieve something like this, because everyone needs to understand their role in what they're doing, because you still need to have financials to pay people, and you still need to have human in the loop checkpoints to do certain things. But in doing so, you can still increase automation without removing controls that you need at certain key points of your processes. So the concept of getting rid of a project doesn't mean that you're just like, all right, it's chaos. It's actually the opposite. It's probably more defined and more structured and more rigid.
Absolutely. There's actually so when I've been making the case to folks, right? Because to me, part of the not having a project but having a process is having high expectations about automating, right? Automating everything. And one of the objections that I would get from folks I would say if you're having like 100 times the amount of content than you used to last year, you have no choice but to automate, right? If you want to have that content be global, you must. But one of the objections, and it's sort of fair, is like, hey, if I automate, I'm losing control, right? I'm going to have stuff that goes into this process that's like racking up cost, and I won't know, and I'll be like broke, and there was no controls there. The other, I think, kind of similar objection, which I'm going to challenge, by the way, is that if things are automated, there's no room for kind of a need to facilitate a need that comes up after or outside the context of the automation that you've defined. And I would say that's not true. Like automation does not preclude checks or control, and it doesn't preclude the idea of being able to have ad hoc work that is done. So and actually this was when I was bringing up this challenge with the Blackbird folks, you guys actually had like, oh yeah, we get this a lot. It's a pretty common objection, and there's a pattern that that we can use to bring that control. So yeah, let's check it out. I think that's
all right. All right. So I think we were talking in the pre-show that you had been talking to Matthijs, our VP of product, and he was talking about a specific use case. And I do believe we have a blueprint for that. And a blueprint, as you can imagine, is you click a couple buttons here. So say if we want to start with our CMS, and we'll select our AI translation app here, and then we want to go create our bird, and voila. In a couple of clicks, you now have your bird. But I think what we're talking about
that,
is
that is very cool.
Is using a not necessarily project concept, but a task concept. You can still have tasks that exist within a platform such as Jira or Monday or anything that you can assign tasks to things to give control. Because here you go, is when we're publishing an entry in Contentful here, we're creating this issue in Jira and we're setting some text value, and then this is one of the most beautiful things in the world, Jim. Like I got to say, the this right here, where we're waiting for another event to happen. We're waiting for the human in the loop to do something in their natural habitat, right? They're going to trigger something. So they're still in control. The automation is paused. It's a checkpoint that is waiting for the human then to, all right, cool, it can move on. And then we go. And then look, a decision that is also branching based off of the information or action taken previously by the human. You still have your controls and you still have your automation. You have your cake and you can eat it too. Is the content, can it be just machine translated and sent back to the CMS? Does it need a project with, oh look, another checkpoint so a human can review the content before it is generated and sent back to the CMS? I think this is what we're talking about. Is it's actually at that point you're deciding the right points in time where a human is going to add value to your process.
Yeah, right.
A human is not adding value every step of the way. It's not. But here you can define in these key checkpoints of when a human needs to be involved, and then you use a system. So even thinking about if you're not automating your job placement with your translators and you need an actual human to do that, I'll still argue you're probably missing out in life if you're not leveraging some automation there. But if you do, then you have a checkpoint that waits for that to be assigned. If you need to do some financial stuff before a quote approval, whatever. I mean, if the content is streamed in and you need to actually tell the customer it's going to be this and then they approve, whatever it needs to be, you can still have those controls, but it's not a project.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically you could, even if you wanted to, do classic project operations through this kind of approach, right? But having it be componentized, I think is pretty cool because you can look at the process. I love this idea of like visual workflows that both machines understand and humans, because it enables you to look at the process and be able to do real kind of like Lean Six Sigma stuff. Like, oh, hey, we could use parallelization here and reduce the takt time of the deliverable, or we could oh, this is a non-value add step. Let's just kill it, right? And you can kill it and see what happens. And then if you need it, put it back. It really is. I feel like facilitates creating like optimal processes. And also you can kind of see your tech stack in a way. It's like, oh, I've got these components here. Oh, I would really like to have a database component where I am like, here's an example, right? This Jira-based ticketing thing. Not ticketing, the task like approvals. Do you need to have the human do this? Well, why don't we capture some data about how often something actually happens when this human looks at it? And if it's like, no, everything is always approved, maybe you don't need that step anymore. And now you have like a data, you can build in pieces of data to be able to answer questions about how well is the process doing and how can we improve, parts of the process.
Yeah, other decision points too. I mean, you mentioned it is, could we have other feedback loops that dictate in a workflow if something else needs to be done? So you publish your content. Imagine like there's specific content on your website, you're just machine translating and you're publishing, and then you realize that it's not getting the same traction as the English content. You can analyze those metrics and over time automate, okay, maybe we need to review this content or at
Yeah.
least repurpose it or do something with it other than leaving it static. You can really let data help guide you on that. And same thing is it. I know the term continuous localization gets overused at times, but that's kind of what we are looking for is continuous content operations. Because
Yeah.
content doesn't stop. It's always being generated. It's always there's new content out there and there's new media and modes that the content needs to be dispersed to, right? It's one of the benefits of some of these new modern headless CMSs, right? Is that key that like a lot of people consume content. Man, I had a client call the other day, and they're like, "I haven't watched a video if it wasn't like this way, like." And it's like, oh yeah, a lot of people aren't watching. I mean, they're probably watching this podcast. I will. My podcast is not gonna. You can turn it on the side if you want to watch it that way. All right. But how do you then repurpose your content? How do you get that content out into those different social media sites or different video platforms or whatever it is? You can only do that if you're constantly focused in on generating the content and tweaking it, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, and why the project for a lot of these work streams just doesn't make sense, even from a billing standpoint too. Like, what do you do? Wait, like, I mean, at that point, it's just like, okay, well, you just have milestones of monthly or whatever it is. You put a line in the sand. It's like, all right, we've published this amount of content and this is the payment for this. You're not going to like stop and say, okay, we did 5 web pages, we're going to charge you for that. We did another 10 web pages, we're going to charge you for that. Doesn't make sense.
I mean, this is a big point. Like one of the reasons why the project has been this kind of natural object in which work gets done is, I think, because of like some mistaken ways to actually execute work, right? Which is like there's been this long thing. Oh, we need to have a critical mass that's worth at least 1 hour of this person's time, right? Because we're going to be sending work to this single person, and if it's under that, we're hitting minimum. So there's been this kind of right sizing function for projects, which is about price, not about or cost model, as opposed to about like what's actually suitable for the business requirements. I think as and by the way, I think that's a problem that actually kind of goes away with enough scale. If you're doing content, and you want to pay a person for an hour of their time, which makes perfect sense, then if they have content from all over the place, right, that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait for this critical mass of content from one thing that they're doing to justify that. If you have enough content, like then you don't, then that becomes something you don't have to worry about anymore. And then you're doing, like, even human work is being done in these kind of streams as opposed to projects.
Yeah.
It becomes much more.
And it goes back to what you said before. If you can move the content operations, the localization to be at the beginning of it, then you don't have to worry about that. You can actually plan accordingly, that it's a continuous flow, that you know that your resources are able to handle it. There's not going to be this ebb and flow. It's going to be more predictable because the content is being generated, localized, and like it's planned accordingly. So I think we can possibly get to that utopia. Now, with that said, Jim, say if someone wants to help to get to that utopia, do you know a guy that could help them on that journey?
Well, yes. So I have actually started a new global content solutions practice. It's called Soliton Global. Soliton being this idea of a kind of a special type of wave that sort of defying the laws of physics perpetuates over space and doesn't change its shape and seems to not lose energy. I think it's this super fascinating concept that is that has real relevance to what we're talking about, and trying to set up operations. Because what you really want to do is set up something that is going to just be part of your operations and ultimately really like invisible, right? It is serving your global content requirements, and you can focus on how do I make my customer happy? Things that are more real, value add to your business. So yeah, solitonglobal.com, jim.compton at solitonglobal.com. I also have a blog that I'd like to pitch. So I've being a journalist, I mean, some of my greatest pleasure in this business has been kind of writing some of these things to challenge people's thinking, or explore new ideas. I'm going to be resurrecting a bunch of these articles and writing new ones at the Compton Scatter, which is my professional blog, where we're looking at, and I really want it to be a conversation, with the community about language, business, technology, culture, even 8-bit music. So yeah, the Compton Scatter and Soliton Global.
Awesome. We'll have those links in the description of this show, so you can reach out to Jim and check him out there. And man, great conversation. I'm sure we'll have you on again. I'm sure there'll be something more controversial. They'll say, I'll read one of your blog posts and I'll be like, all right, I got to get this guy on again. And maybe next time you play some of your music, maybe we open up with a little concert.
I'll write you guys an 8-bit shift left theme song. I would be
nice. All right, great. I'll replace the 8-bit one I already have with.
Okay, no, don't do that.
Just for your episodes. How about just for your episodes, you get your own theme song?
All right, that's fine. Or I can do some little incidental music that you can put in the background. So cool.
Interludes. Jim, no, pleasure. Thank you again for joining. And until next time, bird watchers, keep shifting left. Goodbye.